Hi, I'm Rachel A. Brune, and I am the senior editor at Falstaff Dread, which is Falstaff Books' new horror imprint. My absolute pleasure to be interviewing Gabino Iglesias, who is an amazing horror author, a fantastic mentor, coach, and educator, and an editor par excellence. So,
Great.
I'm assuming that everybody who is here knows that this is the guest of honor interview with Gabino Iglesias.
Yay!
Yay! Which, by the way, I'm really excited to do because I cannot remember
You have
when.
notes. Oh God. Okay.
Maybe. Okay, so here's what happened. John Hartness, the programming director, said,
Yes.
"You're my horror person, and so you're going to do the guest of honor interview with Gabino Iglesias." And after I finished squealing at the top of my voice, like, I immediately went back and I kind of reread Devil Takes You Home, and I just finished reading Zero Saints because I had started it, and I was like, well, I'm going to finish this before the interview. And I had about 30 questions. 30.
All right.
40. Just all of them. I'm not going to ask you all of them because I know that probably some people will also have some questions that they would like to ask. But I wanted to start off with giving you a chance to introduce yourself. Now, if you were at the opening ceremonies, you know that Gabino Iglesias is a Stoker-nominated horror author. He's also a teacher and a mentor, as well as a book reviewer, a Writes for Lit reactor, has sat on a couple of juried panels for the Shirley Jackson Awards.
Yeah, my mom told me not to judge people, so I really like to judge stuff as much as possible.
But you've got a significant body of work. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe introduce yourself with some other things that maybe some of the bio and other things that we've talked about haven't really gotten into.
Oh, of course. Bios are weird. I think I have like 25 or 30 of those because you write for different places, and then they ask you for a bio, and then they will be very specific. Like send us the 1-line bio, or the 2 lines, or the short paragraph. There's one that looks like the CD, and that one includes all the other stuff. It's out there. I write stuff. I've been writing stuff for a very long time. I decided to switch languages and start writing in English in 2008. First book came out in 2012, and it's been a long war of attrition. And now The Devil Takes You Home sort of became the, what do they call it, the breakout book?
Okay.
Right, so it only takes the right kind of people to pay attention for it to kind of balloon. And so then it's a Stoker-nominated book, but then it also received nominations for Reading the West, the Anthony Awards, the Edgar Awards in New York City, and I'm missing like 1 or 2 more. So as soon as they start nominating you for stuff, then everybody cares, which is awesome because you get invited places. So that's what I do. I've also been a book reviewer for the last 12 or 15 years. I review for small places and then also really big places like the LA Times, NPR Books, the Boston Globe. We just put out our summer reading list, came out yesterday. Of course, I have horror in there. Paul Tremblay's collection is coming up. And now I get to do this full time, which is the most amazing part, because everything that goes on the bio, it doesn't matter because you already did it in the past. What matters is what you're doing now, and I get to go places and talk to awesome people. So that's about it.
When you say that's it, I feel like we're going to talk some more about it. So on Tuesday, I was taking a query letter workshop.
Right. That was fun.
It was a lot of fun. And there was a quote that I very specifically remember from that, which was, writing is not about being great.
Yeah.
It's about constantly getting better.
Correct.
And so you do a lot of mentorship. You're a professor at SNHU.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of throw this at you. What are some of the challenges of taking on a teaching and a mentorship role? And what are some of the rewards?
Well, the rewards is the easy part. You get, as a reviewer, I get to read stuff before it comes out to the general public. As a mentor, editor, and professor, I get to read stuff in like the egg stage. Like, this is an idea. What can we do to make it better? What can I do to help you find your voice? And then it's the idea of, like, you know, if you're an elementary teacher, you're helping shape the future. So as an educator, it's kind of like helping shape the future of literature. And also you see a lot of really happy faces when someone who's starting out has heard, for example, you know, fantasy or romance. It's not really literature. You're not supposed to. And then they find someone like me who says it's totally literature and you can do whatever the hell you want. In fact, learn to say whatever your genre of preference can do, mine can do better, and then just rock and roll and do that thing. The challenges are basically fighting, which is, I think it's very timely nowadays, fighting misinformation. So I teach a class at SNHU about marketing, and then folks come to me with like, I wrote a middle grade book and I have a marketing plan for Facebook. And I'm like, middle grade readers even not on Facebook. So let's talk about what you need to do. We were talking about TikTok, for example. So because writing has been so big for so many people for so long, you get those stupid ideas that just get repeated and repeated and perpetuated. And you know, romance is not serious literature. You shouldn't do that. And horror fiction is goes to the kiddie table. It can't do anything serious or political or, you know, help enact change. So battling that on the daily with folks who are just coming in and they have all the preconceived ideas that they've inherited for years and years of like, well, I'm gay, but I'm not supposed to be out because then I won't get published. It's like, no. Let me just show you all the LGBTQ publishers and editors that I know so that you know that you're welcome at these places. It's constant. There's so much misinformation and so much baggage that we've carried through decades and decades and decades. And you have to try to get it out of the way and make them forget about and change the microchip the first couple of weeks.
I would say that having people in publishing like yourself who are visible and who are both writing as well as in those educational positions, but then also you're an editor.
Yeah.
So you've edited, you've had a chance to shape those tables of contents. When you go into the table of contents, or when you're reading your slush and thinking about how that final form is going to look at, is this something that you're consciously thinking of, or is this something that starts to take form as you start finalizing like an anthology or something like that?
So what I like to do is I like to prove people wrong. So what I like to do is when I'm reading the slush, I'm not reading bios or names. I'm only reading the story. Because when I was coming up and I couldn't get into an anthology, everybody told me, it's not because you're brown or you have the weird name, it's because editors only care about quality. And I was like, wow, it's so weird that people of color and women and like, you know, queer folks can't write good stories because we're not getting into these anthologies. This is so odd. So when I started editing, I was like, I'm gonna sort of put this thing to the test. So I'm gonna select the stories first and then come back to the emails. And he was like, well, here's a straight white dude. Look, it's a trans writer. Who knew trans folks could write good stories? And then at the end of the day, when you put the table of contents together, you go, you know, white male, straight white woman, lesbian, female black writer, Latino writer, another white dude. And it's about the quality, and you prove them wrong. And every single anthology that I've edited contains, it almost seems like we're pushing for diversity, and then every single one has been nominated for something. So all of those folks can produce outstanding stories because in the end of the day, it is about quality. But some people look for quality only in certain groups. And those people can die in a tire fire. So we're changing the game.
So, and that actually brings me to something that I wanted to talk about. There's many things that I want to talk about. And so just be prepared for me to say that more than once. So I started reading, when I first started reading your works, I knew one Spanish cuss word. And now that I have finished, not finished, but now that I have read several of your works,
right.
I've done a lot of Googling, and I know several.
Good.
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but that when I was reading Zero Saints and thinking about what you had said about how you had used to write in Spanish or had written in Spanish, then moved to writing in English, and then found this place where the language is just flowing, whether it's English or Spanish. There's a scene in Zero Saints, and it's I would call it an elegy where the narrator is talking about La Frontera.
Right.
And I thought that was just this amazing emotional moment, talking about when you cross the border.
Yeah.
Who are you before? Who are you after? And how that changes you. And I wanted to just open the floor to maybe have you talk a little bit about what went into that scene. And are you satisfied with the end result? What do you want people to get out of it? Just, I want to know more about it.
So I'm obsessed with borders because I think they really shouldn't exist. So in the United States now, you mentioned the border, no one thinks Canada at all.
Yes,
like there's another border because countries say like this is my space, or like this is, you know, you're driving your car and suddenly it's like it's a different time zone because you're in another state now. You crossed into our land, which doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the Native Americans, and now we're here on borrowed time. So we talk about frontiers and going places and you know, going across borders. And for me, I was born and I had a blue American passport, but I couldn't vote. So I immediately was like, so you have some rights, you don't have all of them. You're a second-class citizen. You might have a passport, but you were born in a colony, which means you don't get to vote for the president or, you know, have representation or any of that. So it was early on that I became kind of obsessed with those borders and things. So borders are mental borders and spiritual borders and language borders and then physical borders. And in writing that, very sort of repetitious, when you cross la frontera, when you cross la frontera. I'm telling you all the things that happen to people when they go across one of those kinds of borders. So you can't go back. If you've been a member of the LGBTQ community in the closet your entire life, you cannot get back in the closet. Like, you put it out into the world, people are going to treat you different. You're gonna suffer certain things, and some folks are going to celebrate certain things with you. But there's no undoing. You crossed into that. You get a terminal degree because you wanted an education. There's no unlearning some of the stuff that you've learned, even though some of it might be very, very painful. You move countries. You start new gigs. You cross into another genre as a writer. There's no undoing. There's never like putting the genie back in the bottle. So that chapter was sort of like thinking through, you know, all of those things. And some folks liked it, which was awesome.
I loved it. That was one of those scenes that, and I don't know if y'all have read Zero Saints, highly, highly recommend it. It was one of those scenes where I wanted to keep going, but I couldn't. I had to stop in the process. I had to stop. I think I'm still kind of processing because I just finished the book like yesterday, and so I'm still kind of processing all of that. Which what I really enjoy about your work is, yes, it's horror, and so you have these very violent scenes, these very visceral, physically visceral horror scenes that are also emotionally eviscerating. There's many, many levels. And I'm going to talk about the bolt cutter scene. So in The Devil Takes You Home, for the folks who haven't read it, there is a scene that is very violent. And, okay, so it's very violent. For me though, the most intense violence in that scene is the emotional violence that the main character is going through. And I think that we all have a vision of ourselves where we want to always see ourselves doing the right thing. Yeah. And when we don't, and when we stand by, there's a significant moral injury that occurs. And so I wanted to kind of do the same thing, open it up to have you talk about that scene and ask, you know, from a writer's perspective, how do you layer those aspects of a scene to work on all of those different areas of a reader's experience?
Well, first of all, I've always been obsessed with religion and how I grew up thinking that folks had religion, whichever one it was, they had it in their life because some folks had maybe a little bit of a harder time just being decent people. So you needed a set of guiding light principles, right? But from time to time, I would see people doing insane, horrendous things because their religion gave them an excuse to do it. And folks don't like when you hold up a mirror. You're like, it's not an excuse to be an asshole. Like, look at what you're doing. So in this case, it's there's a kid who's the victim here, but he can't talk. So you have to punch the reader with, this is happening, and it is very, very, very wrong. Put yourself in the shoes of this character. Do you say something? Do you risk your own life to save somebody else? And if you don't, the act that you witnessed will haunt you for the rest of your life. Are you prepared to deal with that? Like, do you want your safety to matter more than the safety of some little kid you don't know? Or are you going to try to ignore it? Because sometimes we're just like, just going to get through it, let the racists scream on the bus. It's not no problem. I don't want to get stabbed over this. It comes back. It's a ghost. It goes behind you and whispers in your ear. Silent ally is not an ally. You're a coward. Why didn't you do something? You know better. You should have done the right thing. So I'm all for horror and I'm all for violence, but I think we were talking about John Wick yesterday. John Wick came out in 2014. Instantly became one of my favorite movies because everybody was focusing on the gun fu and John Wick flying around and killing 250 dudes with shots to the face, which is awesome and highly entertaining.
Yes.
For me, the entire movie was a study on grief. Like, people will put up with things, and then everyone reaches a breaking point. For this guy who had put all his love and the sense of loss and companionship that he was missing, he was already heartbroken, and he took all of that and put it on a little puppy. You kill the puppy, you create a monster, and that's all of us. We all have that John Wick inside. Kind of like the Hulk just pisses off enough, and then you get to see it. Everybody has a different breaking point. So it wasn't about the highly entertaining, high-flying, shooting action sequences. It was the point where all of these things start is the grief. Like, you hurt someone so bad that they shift and they become something else. And for the rest of the movie, it doesn't matter that he's a very morally great character who used to be a gun for hire. None of that matters. We're rooting for the guy now for 4 movies in a row. Yes. We don't care that he's killed like 10,000 men because they murdered the puppy. And when someone kills your puppy, you have to do the right thing. So when I sit down and write, it's like, all right, let's do some child mutilation. But if it's empty, if it means nothing, I'm a fan of that literature. Like, I will read Ryan Harding to death and Edward Lee and giant monsters moving through the woods and like everybody's talking about Cocaine Bear, but there's an old book, bizarre book called Bigfoot Crank Stump, where Bigfoot just gets a hold of Crank and goes on a rampage. It's a very thin book, very entertaining. All right, but then you read it and it's like having a snack. It's like, all right, that was a thing, I did it, it doesn't impact you. And I want those scenes to linger, not because there's blood and violence and severed body parts, but because there was something that made you so profoundly uncomfortable, not necessarily about the book, but about the way that you felt you would have acted if you were in that character's shoes. And those are fun because you have to do it yourself. What would I do? It's like, I can't be throwing shade at my characters without questioning myself.
Yes, that was, and that's the reason why, like, I follow you online, not in a stalker way, but like in a fan way. And when The Devil Takes You Home came out, and people started complaining about the fact that there was English and Spanish, and I was like, oh, boo-hoo, A. And B, like, that's what you're mad about? Like, there's these scenes of just incredible violence and you're mad about some Spanish? I mean, come on, man. Yeah, come on. And I wanted to talk to you about that, and not in like, oh, Gabino, please represent all of the brown authors. But in a way, because I have, an author, Gabino Iglesias, which I think you've also published in Cemetery Dance, amazing author. And I wanted to kind of give you the floor to talk a little bit about developing Latino and Latina authors and finding them a place in the horror genre, because I think that it's so untapped. There's so much there.
Yeah.
And which is one of the reasons why, like I said, I've enjoyed reading your stuff and the stuff that you edit.
So there's the information is out there, but information tends to be painful. So there's things like the Leon Lowe report on diversity and a few others. Up until 2009, 97% of the literary awards given in the United States were given to white writers. I refuse to believe that you cannot find writers of color who can produce stuff at the same level. But publishing is not going to push them into your face, which is why the New York Times bestsellers list is perennially white mostly. So when you get in a position where you can bring in other voices, it's almost a responsibility. Like, if it delivers the same quality than everybody else, there's no reason to put them away. And we know that's happened in the past. It's inconvenient to face that truth. But sometimes you just give zero fucks, and then you just go and you do it anyway. And then when people get angry, it's just like the Spanish thing. That's the thing that made you angry. Good, I'm gonna do it again. I expect your hate mail. I thrive on it. I was born in chaos. Just give it to me. Give it to me. It keeps me going. The angrier you make me, the harder I'm gonna go. So you're doing me a favor. And when I come across those voices, and some of them I haven't had the opportunity to help, but folks like Cynthia Pelayo was just reviewed in the New York Times. Just yesterday, some writer named Stephen King reviewed My Buddy Sean Cosby's new novel, All the Sinners Bleed, Black Dude from Appalachia. So like when I see those voices, it's like my responsibility to throw as much as I can behind them to say, we have a very short time on earth to make up for decades of not being around. So let me help in any way that I can. So taking the bios and the names away from the stories is my way of doing it and being able to sleep at night. Like I'm not gonna do the reverse thing where it's like, I'm not gonna publish white writers now, because for many years, the writers who are sending me stories now are not to blame for how racist publishing was 50 years ago. Or how racist the country was 80 years ago. So it's more about, I'm gonna open the door and let everybody come in, let everybody know that they're welcome. And then the pieces fall where they may, and every single time, it's a very widely diverse list of authors. And as time goes by, that increases, because there's a little kid right now seeing those kids and like, hey, I can find myself in those books. If you read the Leon Lowe reports, we teach our children to feel empathy for and engage with giraffes, hippos, aliens, witches, talking cabbages before we present to them a black person, a brown person, a Native American individual, or a queer person. So those people don't exist. First, learn how to deal. You're a kid growing up in New York. You know about zebras and lions and giraffes and all these animals that you have to go to the zoo to see, but you're walking around the streets. And we're not going to tell you about the Puerto Ricans in New York. We're not going to tell you about the Italian migration. We're not going to tell you about any of that because it's inconvenient. One day at a time, one book at a time, one story at a time, one anthology at a time. We need to change it, and that's what we do, or try.
So I'm going to ask you to put on your prognostication hat. Right.
Uh-oh.
It's going to fit, I think.
Yeah.
So we've got horror right now.
Yes.
And what, for you, what is horror right now? And in 5 years, what is horror going to look like?
So horror used to be fear of the other, right? It was always, let's make a monster, and then the monster you kind of realize was just like Jewish people. And then you're like, well, we're not going to do that anymore. So at some point in the last 2 decades, the other learned how to write really way better than it ever was. And then we said things like, you read Octavia Butler? Like, let us show you the way of our patron saint. So now horror is absolutely everything. Do you like erotica? We got horror with erotica. Do you like romance? We got romantic horror. Do you like comedy? We have romantic, funny, painful, mystery with horror, crime with horror, literary fiction with horror, historical fiction with horror, sci-fi with horror. Horror is the best dancing partner in terms of genres because it mixes with everything, because life is horror. And now we're saying, hey, by the way, everyone's welcome. So if you have, JD was on a panel with me, Jewish horror, tell us your Jewish horror stories. For you, postpartum depression was a horror, tell us about it. We're going to consume that. Are you a trans person in the middle of transitioning and there are parts of it that are horrific, socially, emotionally? Bring us those stories. We want to read that. So we have vampires and werewolves and demonic possession and haunted houses and zombies, and you know, we do all of that. It's very entertaining. That's what we grew up on. And then we're saying, let's do some other stuff. Let's do stuff about feeling like an outsider. Let's do stuff about dealing with mental health issues. Let's do stuff with being, you know, the other. That's where we are now. There's this giant wave of folks like Haley Piper and Eric LaRocca and Cynthia Pelayo and a bunch of authors who are others saying, we're here, we're super loud. Like we're not gonna back away. And we're gay and we're trans and we're brown and we're bilingual and we're multicultural and we're gonna do our thing. And you can't go back. You can tell these people now, like, we're not gonna publish you because we have so many pathways that if you try to do that now, we would say, fuck it, we'll publish ourselves. And the stories will still be out there. So hopefully in the next decade, we're gonna see more of this stuff where a black dude from Appalachia can be a New York Times bestseller writer, where someone like Silvia Moreno Garcia can be the new literary superstar, where my Blackfeet friend Stephen Graham Jones can be the biggest thing in 1 year and collect a Stoker and a Locust and a Shirley Jackson, and then you can say, well, it's there, they're everywhere. And we have to make sure that everything is at the same level that Sylvia can write, or Sean or Stephen Graham Jones, and that's what matters. Now, it doesn't matter that it's a brown woman or a black guy or a Native American. What matters is the quality that they brought to the table. And the next 10 years should be super exciting. So, yeah.
Where can we find you here at the con, and where can we find you online in your books? Obviously the bookstore, and you should go there immediately and buy them all, but go ahead.
If you are here, I'm gonna go sign some books right after this, so you can literally follow me to the author signing table thing. I'm online. If you've ever found one of my books online, Gabino Iglesias is pretty unique in terms of names, so I'm lucky that I can get to be myself on all social media platforms, so it should be easy to find. My preferred method is to support your local indies. Like, if you can buy my books, that's fantastic. You're doing me a favor, you're putting food in my mouth, and ensuring that I can keep doing this, but you're also feeding the mom and pop shop. But some people live in the middle of nowhere because this is a very big country and you might not have an indie bookstore of your choice, or it's like 275 miles away. Don't drive 300 miles for my book. Give your money to the bad people at Amazon because, you know, they feed some mouths too, I guess.
Thank you, Gabino Iglesias, for this awesome interview. Really appreciate all of your patience asking the questions. Thank you, audience, for the questions and for being here. And I just want to say I loved your books. Looking forward to the next one.